This is CBC Here and Now.
Tonight, the end to a family's long search as police identify the human remains found in Paradise earlier this week.
These university students would like to see a rollback on their tuition fees all the way back to free. We'll have more on that story coming up on Here and Now.
To not move on that promise, which is basically moving away from that promise, it's unconscionable.
Fertility doctors wanting to bring IVF services here, only to be ignored by government for years. Our CBC Investigates story is ahead in about 30 minutes. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. We'll get to those stories shortly, but first, police have identified the human remains found in Paradise earlier this week. They belong to a man who's been missing for 4 years. Police say it's 33-year-old Trevor Hamlin. But as Here and Now's Mark Quinn reports, there are still questions about how he died.
Hamlin was reported missing on June 19th, 2018, and was last seen days prior on Saturday, June 16th.
Hamlin's bones were found on Monday. They were laying on the ground in a wooded area near here. The RNC says a man walking a dog found the remains. Police are still on the scene today while the investigation continues. It's about a 10-minute drive from Hamlin's home where he was last seen. His sister spoke with CBC in 2018, days after Hamlin went missing.
The fact that no one knows where he's to is just strange for him to just vanish.
Police say how Hamlin died has not been determined.
The investigation into the cause of Hamlin's death is ongoing with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, supported by the services of an anthropologist and an archaeologist.
Hamlin's family posted a statement on Facebook today. It says, after 4 long years, we can finally say Trevor has been found and we are able to get the closure we desperately needed. It continues, we do not have the details around Trevor's death at the moment, but for now that is okay. As we get to put Trevor to rest, we no longer have to say he's missing. Hamlin's family played a central role in the search to find him. They're now thanking the police, the Rovers Search and Rescue Group, and those trying to help to determine the cause of death. They say Hamlin will be laid to rest in Grenfell's Windsor near his father's grave, but that further details have not been determined yet. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, on both sides of the island today, post-secondary students were protesting, demanding the university stop raising the price of tuition. Memorial University fees skyrocketed for students this year. The CBC's Heather Gillis has this report from the St. John's campus.
Their message is loud and clear. These post-secondary students want tuition fees reduced. Students marched from Munn to the Confederation Building, banging on the doors, hoping politicians hear their demands.
We want them to stop tuition hikes because how are we supposed to get ahead in lives if we can't afford to better ourselves through post-secondary education?
Last year, tuition cost just under $1,300 a term for Newfoundland students. This year, new domestic Munn students pay $3,000 a term for a full course load, or about $6,000 a year. For new international students, it's even steeper at $20,000 a year. Students say they're finding it hard to keep up.
I'm working 3 jobs plus a scholarship, and I was only able to pay like half. So luckily my parents helped out with the other half, but next semester I'm shagged. I'm working 3 jobs right now to try to keep up with tuition, and that's just with domestic tuition.
Students have demanded change before and got action. Tuition shot up to nearly $1,700 a term from $1,300 in 1997. Student protests in '99 pushed the province to freeze tuition.
When I graduate, I'm going to have to pay back around $50,000 in student loans.
Between 2001 and 2003, tuition dropped nearly a quarter to $1,275 and stayed there for almost 20 years. Students started to feel the pinch in 2015 and 16 after the provincial government cut MUN's operating grant, and then the university increased fees. In 2017, another cut by the provincial government, and then tuition first went up for out-of-province and international students. But the axe fell last year. A $68 million cut to the university's budget over 5 years forced tuition rates skyward. And the increases are causing some students, like Courtney Bowers, to reconsider MUN.
Because I'm not going to be able to do it every semester, and student loans not going to give me enough.
Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
Can I hear your voices? I want them to hear us up there. Can I hear your voices?
Students, faculty, and staff gathered at MUN's Grenfell campus in Corner Brook this morning before marching down to the Premier's office. About 100 people were there, also calling for lower tuition fees. International students were front and center, demanding to be treated fairly.
We don't have job opportunities. We don't have any funding. They say there's scholarships, but they are not for international students. They're for everybody else, but international students don't even get a little cut of it. But we're paying 4 times more than everybody. So can you imagine paying that much money and not getting anything?
Well, back in St. John's, Education Minister John Haggie did not go out to meet students on the steps of Confederation Building today, but he did respond to the students' calls for reduced tuition this afternoon. He says Memorial University still offers students a good value for the education.
It's the second most affordable Canadian university in general for domestic students, Canadian students. And on the kind of international stage, our tuition rates are 20% lower than the Canadian average. It's a good value proposition.
And still with Memorial University, the final registration numbers for the university following that controversial jump in tuition fees are in. And just as the university had predicted, the number of new full-time undergraduate registrations is down this fall. But as Terry Roberts reports, overall enrollment is stable.
If you were in this crowd today and you're a new undergraduate student at Memorial, you're paying $600 per course this year. If you're an international student, $2,000, the highest tuition fees ever at the university. But if you're a returning student, you're locked into the old fee structure and paying just half of those new tuition prices. One of the consequences of this 2-tiered fee structure and the end of a long-standing tuition freeze for local students, the number of new full-time undergraduates is down by 400, or 19.1% at the St. John's campus. At Grenfell campus in Corner Brook, down 50 students, or 18%. Proof, say critics, that education is becoming unaffordable and inaccessible for those with limited means.
I think the reality is that with these changes to education funding in this province for post-secondary, students are being priced out. They can no longer afford to go to post-secondary, and that's reflected in our data for this year.
The Faculty Association says the tuition hike will have deep consequences.
It's a lose-lose situation because it's not going to fix the budget like they anticipated. Secondly, it will hurt our economy in the long run because post-secondary education is a must these days for any decent job.
The provincial government provided a grant of nearly $70 million annually to keep rates frozen. But that grant is disappearing, and the university says it had no choice but to end the freeze, and calls to reverse that decision. Simple answer: not going to happen.
If I was a student here, I might even be out there with them. But I'm not a student here, and I can see the bigger picture of how to fund the university.
Fees at Memorial are still among the lowest in Canada. But what will the university look like if student registration keeps falling at this pace?
If we were to drop every year by 20%, of course the student load would drop, and we'd have to look for other places to fill the places at the university, or of course downsize.
But the overall enrollment picture at Memorial is not so stark. There are just over 19,000 students registered this fall, a 2% drop, kept stable by a 6% increase in graduate student enrollment, and a continued influx of international registrations, a group now numbering more than 4,000 from more than 100 countries.
That's absolutely amazing for Memorial, but it's also amazing for our community and the province of Newfoundland and Labrador.
This is what democracy sounds like!
For students, for university administrators, it's all money. What's the price of affordable tuition?
Too damn high! Too damn high!
And how much does MUN need to keep the lights on? Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
A new CBC series takes a closer look at the stories of people in the province who are impacted by the need for home or respite care. I'm Henrike Wilhelm, and I'll have the details about this series just ahead.
Well, here is the scene in Portugal Cove late this afternoon when one of the ferries on the Bell Island run struck the other. The Beaumont Hamel and the Legionnaire are docked and being assessed at this hour. Officials from the Department of Transportation and Transport Canada are on site investigating. The department says helicopter service will be arranged if necessary, but it's expected the Legionnaire will return to service shortly.
Well, you can see from that video there that the weather has changed. We saw some gray skies for the first time in a little while today, but temperatures were much warmer than they have been. 11 degrees in St. John's was the daytime high, 12 in Bonavista, same thing for Gander. And then as you head towards Labrador, those temperatures, daytime highs only around 4 degrees today in Lab City. And if you take a look at the 24-hour temperature change, that's nearly 10 degrees cooler right now than it was yesterday in Lab City. And we've got that trend happening across a good chunk of the island, and we'll continue to do so as we head through the night tonight. You can already start to see that temperature change in Gander down to 6 degrees with those winds shifting to the west. This pattern will continue, and we'll likely see our first frost tonight, or first freeze tonight for parts of the province. I'll get into the full forecast details coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, searchers are looking for a man who went berry picking yesterday and hasn't been heard from since. Brent Warren of Chapel Arm is missing in the Fairhaven area, about a half-hour drive from Whitburn. Police say the 58-year-old left to go berry picking around noon yesterday. The vehicle he was driving has been found just off the Trans-Canada Highway. The Avalon North Wolverines search and rescue team, along with police officers and a police dog, are searching. A new CBC NL series is taking a closer look at those navigating home and respite care in Newfoundland and Labrador. Many will need help if they hope to remain in their home, whether that's due to disability or old age. Concerning Care aims to bring those stories into focus. CBC NL's Alicia Dix and Henrike Wilhelm worked on the series, and Henrike joins us now to tell us more about it. So, Henrike, what does this new series Concerning Care touch on?
Well, Carolyn, many people in the province rely on home and respite care. Those supports help people stay in their homes longer. They also support individual caregivers. According to the Health Department, about 8,600 people are enrolled in the home support program. Some families also choose to privately coordinate care. Now, not everyone struggles, but many do. And it's the intention of this series to highlight some of those stories.
Okay, so what are some of the struggles that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so there are various avenues when trying to keep a loved one home for as long as possible. Some families take on the role of caregiver, something that's both physically and mentally demanding. Others hire support workers, or at least they try. Like Kelly Piercy, whose mother has dementia. Piercy had a hard time finding a worker to care for her mother.
The home support agency I was dealing with, well, I'll send somebody from this town for a few hours or that town for a few hours, but it never really worked. So I finally got on the phone and said, "You don't have anybody, do you?" And they didn't.
That was Kelly Piercy, who struggled to find support for her mother when she developed dementia. She ended up taking on a lot of the care herself. But for some, that can be too much to handle, being ready to jump into action at any time. On top of all that, the person they're caring for is their own family member, so it's an emotional task as well. Part of this series will explore stories from people hitting their breaking points.
And Enrica, what about the issues people face when it comes to finding long-term and personal care placement? Will you explore that as well?
So it's not the main focus of the series, but the two issues are intertwined. For many families, there's a point where it's not longer possible to keep a person at home because the amount of care required can't be covered, or those providing the care have reached their limit. But finding a bed in a facility isn't an easy feat either. The province says right now more than 400 people province-wide are waiting for a long-term care bed. Over 150 people are waiting for a personal care bed. So those struggles will be touched on as well. We're also hoping people will be sharing their home and respite care stories with us, and they can do that by emailing care-struggles@cbc.ca.
Okay, Enrica, I'm sure a lot of people will be relating to these stories. Thank you so much for this. That's Here and Now's Enrica Wilhelm, and you can follow the series over the coming weeks on Here and Now, CBC Radio, and on our website, cbc.ca/NL. Well, the weekly COVID update is out today, and it shows 2 more people have died in the last week due to the virus. The deaths were in the eastern and western health regions. One person was 80 years old or older, while the other was in their 70s. As of today, 9 people are in hospital due to COVID-19. 2 of them are in critical care.
Oh, no, they can take a stand.
Canada's Governor General Mary Simon was in St. John's today, saying a personal thank you to members of the Canadian Coast Guard for helping out during post-tropical storm Fiona. Coast Guard teams traveled up and down the southwest coast of the island, checking on folks who remained in their homes. Lieutenant Governor Judy Foote accompanied Simon on her visit to the Coast Guard base. Both got to speak with the service members and hear their stories from the storm.
Feeling bad is nice, but you got to do something. I miss you, all of you, miss my life before.
And the final tally is in from Sunday night's Fiona fundraiser in St. John's. The 2-hour We Stand on Guard Again concert brought in an impressive $1,005,000 in donations. That money was collected over the phone and online, as well as from ticket sales. Those funds will go to the Red Cross recovery efforts for Southwest Newfoundland communities hammered by September's storm. And don't forget, the federal government pledged to match whatever was donated, bringing the true total to $2,010,000. Looking at the NHL now, Newfoundlander Dawson Mercer scored the game-winning goal for the New Jersey Devils last night in Vancouver.
Sharangovich with Mercer. Sharangovich centers. Mercer scores!
Mercer scored the 3rd goal of the game while shorthanded in the 2nd period. It's his 4th of the season. The Devils came away with a 5-2 win over the Canucks. It's the Devils' 4th win in a row, the first streak like this since 2018.
You know, Newfoundlanders have quirky little folklore things that they come up with.
So what guarantees a banner year for Dogberries? Is it the birds, the bees, the summer before? I'll be looking into that a little bit next. And also we're going to talk a little bit about the weather that's happening. We've got some windy conditions over the next 24 to 36 hours. We'll have that and the full forecast coming up. Todd, the only thing we see on this dogberry tree is a set of Christmas lights. Is that to make up for the lack of dogberries?
Yeah, this year was rather poor production in dogberries compared to previous years. And our poor tree looks so empty, we figured we'll put some Christmas lights on it to make it look pretty.
So definitely an early start to the Christmas
So
tree.
yeah, so we're getting geared up already now for our Merry and Bright Festival.
Tell me what you're noticing. You said there's a lack of dogberries, but why is that?
Okay, so last year you might recall, it's like the hillsides were just orange. There were so many dogberries. It was a bumper crop year. This year, on the other hand, you know, individual trees will have a few berries here and there, but compared to last year, it's actually quite abysmal compared to what it was previous.
Do you know why that is? Why one year there's an abundance and the next year there's none?
So it varies from year to year with the dogberries as to how well they're going to produce their berries. And it really gives you an information about the previous growing season more so than what's going to happen in the coming winter. So what happens if you have a really good summer, then the trees will set lots of flower buds for the following year. So then the following year you'll get lots of flowers, but then in June when they're blooming, if we're not having good weather, nice sunny dry weather, then the pollinators are not going around to do their thing. Then if there's no pollinators, you're not going to get any berries. So even if you have lots of fruit or lots of flowers, sorry, you're still not going to get very much fruit if the weather is poor when the pollinators are going around.
So that basically tells us that last year that's exactly what happened.
Yes, so last year it was the previous summer to that was a bumper summer, really good weather, lots of seed or flower buds set on the trees. Then last spring, the previous spring, we had lots of good weather, lots of pollinators, bumper crop of berries. This year, on the other hand, the trees are sort of taking a bit of a breather because they had such a good crop last year. They don't really need to produce a lot of berries this year. And then what few berries or flowers they did produce, the weather in June was probably not suitable for the pollinators to be as active as what they normally would be, and therefore we're seeing the end result now with not a lot of berries on the trees.
So if the berries reflect the weather for the year before, what do you think this is to say about folklore and where that came about?
The old adage, you know, if you have a lot of dogberries, it's going to be a hard winter. And that's basically Mother Nature's way of providing food for any of the overwintering waxwings or overwintering robins that decide to stay here for the winter. You know, okay, well, we're going to have a hard winter, we'll produce lots of berries. On the other hand, if there's not a lot of berries, it's going to be an easy winter, okay? So the birds can probably find food sources elsewhere. Okay, that has not worked this year. It didn't work last year. Last year there were robins everywhere because there was lots of food. That's really what it comes down to. It all comes down to groceries. So if there's a lot of berries around, the birds will stick around. This year, not a lot of berries, not a lot of birds. A lot of the robins have hightailed it out of here. They know something probably that we don't know.
If the berries in the fruit trees reflect the weather of the year before, how do you think it came to be that people use the dogberries to predict the winter?
Again, you know, Newfoundlanders have quirky little folklore things that they come up with, and so I suspect a lot of it probably stems down, you know, to basically, I suppose, almost like thinking, you know, well, God created, you know, is going to care for the birds, going to care to get them through the winter, and as a result, you know, it was through God's intervention that we end up getting a good crop year versus a poor crop year. You know, and it's just one of those things. I'm sure there's no science to it at all, and I wouldn't even say if you check back consistently. Like I said, last year, tons of berries, one of the mildest winters we've had on record. This year, no berries. Are we going to have a mild winter? Sort of predictions sort of suggest we might have another winter like last year, but maybe we're going to have tons of snow this winter. God only knows.
Which is likely. We've got warm waters. We have, you know, some of that Arctic air moving down. Guess we'll find out.
Guess we're going to find out.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Todd.
You're very welcome.
Well, Todd certainly knows his stuff, but I am still going to hold out hope that fewer dogberries will mean that we will have a nice, easy winter this year.
Yeah, again, time will tell, I suppose. We do have some warm air. Looking at the prediction models ahead, though, it does look like November, December are going to stay up above normal, too. So, guess we'll see.
Yes, we will. Indeed. So the nearer future, how are things looking?
A little easier to predict. We've got a big cool down coming. We've been, been
spoiled.
Spoiled. That's a good word for it. Yes. Let's take a look at the current temperatures out there right now. You can already start to see that drop in temperatures. Hanging on to the 9-10 degrees for eastern Newfoundland at the moment, but that is dramatically going to change as we head through the overnight hours tonight. We do have some pretty gusty winds as well, thanks to where we have an area of low pressure. Most areas are seeing those winds sustained right now, particularly along the northern coastal areas of Labrador. Around 48 kilometers per hour, those winds out of the northwest. You can see those winds starting to change though for central and eastern Newfoundland out of the west at the moment right now, but those winds again somewhere between 30 to as much as 60 kilometer per hour sustained winds. Factor in those wind gusts, and it's more like Wreck House area, for example, almost 80 kilometers per hour, and then similar between 60 and 70 up along the coast. So that will continue tonight. And again, that's where this area of low pressure is. You can see some of that colder air starting to filter further south as well. And that will generally be the story as we head through tonight. Just taking a look at some of the rain, or at least the satellite right now. Marble Mountain is online, not seeing it on my in my weather system just yet, but there are some showers around, and certainly for eastern areas of the island as well, some of those heavier showers, and even that sunset spike showing up there on the radar. So we will see these showers generally continue tonight. They'll taper off, but as this colder air moves a little bit further south, there is a risk that we will see some flurries with this. So some of that's showing up for sure. Labrador definitely, even along the long-range mountains, we could see some accumulating snow starting tonight and then continuing through the day tomorrow. And as those temperatures drop, the precipitation that does fall will likely fall as flurries, even into the early morning hours through central and even along the northeast coast. So don't be surprised on the Avalon here as well, even in the metro area, to see some flurries through the overnight. Temperatures, that's why, down to 0 degrees tonight. There is a chance that we will see our first frost for the Avalon. Looks like it should stay above 0 along the south coast. Better chance of seeing that frost, or at least the freeze, through central. But again, those winds, this might help a little bit, but those northwesterly winds a bit gusty tonight, between 50 and 60 kilometers per hour, even more gusty though up along the coast. You'll see your winds gusting around 80 kilometers per hour, and then most will be below 0, -3 to -6 across the Big Land. Now, as we head through the day tomorrow, it'll be unsettled. You're still looking at that chance of flurries through the day. The sun will likely peak out as well. This could fall as graupel though. If you squish it, if you pick it up and you squish it, it's not hard. That is what graupel is. If it's hard, that's hail, and we typically see that in the summer when we see thunderstorms. Other than that, what does fall is likely graupel. As far as Labrador goes, you'll see it clearing out in the morning and the afternoon, but then some more flurry activity will move in for you across Lab West, where we could see some accumulation, a couple of centimeters not out of the question. And that again will move through as we head into Friday morning, but the temperatures will start to climb up. So the chance of flurries will change over to the chance of showers into the morning hours. As far as amounts go, likely less than 2 centimeters for sure. Again, long-range mountains, you may pick up between 5 to 10 centimeters by the time we get into Thursday morning. Taking a look at the forecast for tomorrow, much cooler temperatures, barely over 0, between 1 and 3 degrees or 4 degrees for a good chunk of the island. Along the south coast, a bit warmer, between 5 and 6 degrees. And again, you'll likely see the sun peek out. It won't be fully sunny, but it should peek out through the day. The winds will stay brisk as well out of the northwest, between 40 to 60 kilometers per hour. Up across Labrador, you're looking at your temperatures between 0 and -3 with some sunshine. But again, another warm up is coming. I'll get into those details coming up.
This is like a super stressful, very emotional time for anyone who's going through it.
We will be working with stakeholders, including the obstetrician and gynecologist here.
I don't know who they've been working with, but it hasn't been providers that are trained to provide IVF in the province.
2 fertility doctors have offered to set up a practice, so why has their offer been ignored for years? That's just ahead. Well, tonight on CBC Investigates, we bring you the story of two fertility doctors who say they've offered to set up a clinic here in the province to provide in vitro fertilization services. But they say the province has ignored them, despite the Liberals making it part of their last election platform. And the doctors don't know why they've been ignored. Our Rob Antle has the details.
LaDawn Wellen is now busy chasing her daughter, Freya, after years of chasing the dream of having children at all.
Finally, last November, we welcomed my little girl, which was pretty amazing.
Her journey included 9 rounds of IUI, a type of artificial insemination, plus an expensive trip to Calgary for IVF, or in vitro fertilization, a more complicated process, complicated even more by travel restrictions during the pandemic and the lack of options for that procedure in Newfoundland and Labrador.
We don't have an IVF clinic here. We have doctors who are trained to do IVF, but we do not have a space for them to actually do it. So you have to travel.
There have been pledges to change that as political leaders made their pitches to voters.
We will be working with stakeholders, including the obstetrician and gynecologist here, who firmly believe that a clinic here is possible. We'll work with them to establish it.
I don't know who they've been working with, but it hasn't been with one of the 3 providers that are trained to provide IVF in the province.
There's been meetings about the proposal, but beyond that, no.
Dr. Sean Murphy and Dr. Deanna Murphy have been pressing to perform the full range of fertility treatments, including IVF, since 2018.
1 in 6 couples have infertility. It's a very big problem that people don't realize because people don't talk about it. They're very private about it.
The doctors submitted a proposal which they say would not have introduced any types of new costs to government, but one that wasn't accepted.
We didn't get a clear-cut answer as to why our proposal wasn't an acceptable proposal to the government. We've never gotten a clear-cut answer from anyone within the government level in terms of why we weren't able to move forward.
Yeah.
Here's how they say it would have worked. They wanted to transition some of their services currently covered by MCP out of the public system into a private clinic. These services would remain covered by MCP, but it would allow them to expand their offerings in that private setting to offer IVF, which is not covered by MCP, with everything under one roof. They say there's already an established model for that in how cataract services are provided in the province. The doctors say they will cover the expenses of setting up an IVF clinic here themselves.
The proposal didn't ask for new money or new cost streams to government. IVF would still be patient pay just as it is in most other provinces. So we're applying to basically do what other provinces already do.
Health officials say wait times for fertility services can range from 6 months up to 3 years for an initial assessment. The doctors say their plan would shorten those wait lists, and having an IVF clinic here would broaden the list of those who can benefit locally. Treatments for gender-diverse people seeking fertility preservation, for example, or cancer patients too sick to travel to freeze their eggs.
To promise an IVF clinic in our province, a promise that means so much to so many people, and to not move on that promise, which is basically moving away from that promise, it's unconscionable.
Government officials didn't directly address questions about that commitment from nearly 2 years ago, but the health minister said they recently decided to issue a request for proposals to look at the overall issue of fertility services in the province.
To have a good, solid review of the requirements, the demand, the costs.
Health officials expect the RFP to be issued in a week or 2. Osborne said he doesn't want to talk about timelines until after that's happened. And as for the cost of the doctor's proposal, says he's heard different things from different people.
I understand the view that was put forward by Drs. Murphy. I understand the view that's put forward by the department, and I need to make an informed decision.
When it was first promised, I was, excited, but realistic. It's been promised before here.
Wellen has become an advocate for others with fertility challenges, who now continue to wait and continue to face added costs and complications as part of an already difficult process.
You know, this is like a super stressful, very emotional time for anyone who's going through it. And then to be thrust into a new space with new doctors, not in your comfort zone, it just adds so much unnecessary stress, and we need it here.
Rob Antle, CBC News, St. John's.
11 search and rescue stations on the island of Newfoundland and none in Labrador. The mother of a young fisherman lost at sea last year would like to see that changed. Coming up, we'll speak with Jeanette Russell about the improvements she would like to see to search and rescue in Labrador. The mother of a fisherman who died off the coast of southern Labrador last year was the opening speaker at the Fish Harvesters Safety Association Symposium in St. John's today. Her main message: more search and rescue resources are needed in Labrador. Jeanette Russell's 25-year-old son, Mark Russell, and his crewmate, 30-year-old Joey Jenkins, went missing in September of last year after their vessel, the Island Lady, didn't return to Mary's Harbor. This afternoon, we spoke with Jeanette Russell about why she's adding her voice to the chorus, calling for improvements to search and rescue in Labrador.
To deliver a strong message that fish harvester safety needs to be better addressed. Search and rescue infrastructure in Labrador needs to be addressed. I mean, it's glaringly absent right now. And to share, I felt I had a platform right now, 14 months after losing Mark, that I could share my story, but not just to tell my story, but to offer recommendations for, based upon my family's experience with search and rescue process, what changes I felt need to be made to the system. So that's where this came from.
Can you talk a bit about that? What kind of changes, based on your own experience last year, what kind of changes that you would like to see? What changes could have made a difference to the search for your son?
I don't know if all the changes I've recommended would have changed our situation, but they are rooted in our experience and the conversations we've had with people in the industry since our experience. So I made 7 recommendations for the Federal Search and Rescue Program, namely that I feel Five-Winged Goose Bay should be elevated to a primary search and rescue unit. Right now it's a secondary search and rescue unit, but I feel it warrants the coastline of Labrador, the land mass of Labrador. We had a visual prepared by Merv Wiseman that shows all of the search and rescue assets in Newfoundland, and there's not one marker in Labrador that shows anything in Labrador. If you look at the island of Newfoundland, there's 11 Coast Guard stations all around the island of Newfoundland, and there's 4 fast rescue craft centers. Labrador, there's nothing. There's not even a Coast Guard ship primarily assigned just to Labrador. I mean, I realize in the wintertime that's more challenging, but during the height of the fishing season, the transportation season, I mean, when you consider the north coast of Labrador have to rely upon sea travel year-round because they don't have a land-based transportation system. So, it's time for us to get up to speed and start doing things better. Right now in the fishing industry, there's this culture of acceptance that it is what it is. We got to operate within the system we have, and make the best of it. And that's not good enough. I mean, fishing is a workplace the same as any other workplace. We lost Mark and Joey. We never found the vessel. We never recovered their bodies. So how do we inform so that that doesn't happen again in the future? Was that vessel big enough for them to be fishing in? I don't know. Transportation Safety Board doesn't know, because we'll never know without recovering that vessel to get a more precise idea of what happened, right?
And having Happy Valley Goose Bay, the base, as a primary location, would that just help with response time?
Definitely. Right now, the standing position for search and rescue is half an hour Monday to Friday, 2 hours on weekends and holidays. What I remind people is, keep in mind, that asset is coming from Greenwood, Nova Scotia, or Gander. So if you have an incident in northern Labrador or a fishing trawler off the coast of northern Labrador, you got all that before those assets get there. It's critical for maintaining safety for people and ensuring that they have access to the resources when they need them. My family situations put me in a position where I just can't be silent anymore. I said in my presentation, the only things I have to offer to this issue are my voice and my story. But I will remind people, I have a big mouth, and I'm very loud, and I'm very determined, and I will not step down. And I'm not intimidated by politicians. They're just people the same as we are with a title before their name. And so they're not going to intimidate me with their education or their fancy titles or any of that stuff to think that I'm not going to look at them and say, but really, that's the best you can do? I'm sorry, I don't think so. And when it comes to lives, we have to make sure that the most robust system is in place to protect everybody. And right now, I will go on to record to say, in Labrador, we don't have the same level of protection that people on the island have. And that's not to take anything away from anybody else, and not to be a discredit to any of the good work that's been done on the island of Newfoundland. Not at all. I applaud everybody for the resources they've put in place. But I'm just saying, why aren't they in Labrador?
Well, turning now to some national news, the protesters who occupied downtown Ottawa for 3 weeks last winter received leaked information from police. That came up during testimony today at the inquiry into the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act. It came from a lawyer for some of the organizers who also testified there were significant rifts within the protest leadership. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian has the latest.
It's not just free passage police granted the convoy of protesters for weeks, the inquiry heard today.
There was numerous times where information would come into the operations center from various police sources that a raid was imminent.
In his witness statement, Keith Wilson, who legally represented some convoy organizers during the protest, also mentioned eventually the police caught on and appeared to launch fake operations to throw off the Freedom Convoy participants and test where the leaks were coming from. A range of sources he later claimed from Ottawa Police to CSIS.
I don't know the intricacies, but obviously someone would have been in a room or got a memo or an email saying, this is what we're doing Friday night. And then they would call someone and say, hey, phone so-and-so and let them know this is what's going on.
But it wasn't all an airing of alliances. Wilson also sought to distance himself and some convoy leaders from those calling for the government's overthrow at the time.
I explained that there's only two ways that governments change under our parliamentary system. The first is when the Prime Minister contacts the Governor General and dissolves Parliament. The second, through parliamentary tradition, is where a bill is identified as a confidence vote.
And from an organizer he deemed too extremist.
Pat King, you testified that you knew him from about a year before the convoy protest, is that right?
Yeah, like I wasn't at his house or anything. The first time I was in physical presence of Mr. King was when he showed up in a boardroom in Ottawa during the protest, and it was about 2 or 3 days in, and I immediately instructed him to leave the room. Not him, I told the people around he's got to go.
The rift between different convoy organizers is likely to be only further exposed as more of them testify over the course of the week. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
A regimental funeral was held today for Shaylin Yang, an RCMP officer killed in the line of duty in BC. Thousands of municipal police officers, paramedics, firefighters, and members of the Canadian Armed Forces also attended. Yang was part of the Burnaby RCMP's mental health and homeless outreach team. She was stabbed while responding to a call to help city staff deal with a person living in a tent. A man has been charged with first-degree murder. Well, military tensions have spiked on the Korean peninsula. The North is reported to have fired between 10 and 23 missiles into the sea, and for the first time, one is reported to have hit south of a maritime demarcation line that separates the two countries.
6시 때부터 시작이 됐다면서요? 무려 11차례나 있었다면서요?
South Korean television broadcast air raid warnings and advised the public to find shelter. The South Korean military responded by firing missiles of its own. It launched 3 air-to-surface weapons from fighter jets. Seoul called the North's actions territorial encroachment. Earlier this week, the South and the U.S. began their latest round of joint military drills, and the North sees the drills as a provocation. Tomorrow, CBC Radio's Newfoundland Morning is live from the municipality's NL annual general meeting. One of the topics is a call for regulations around Airbnbs and short-term rentals.
Well, after the cool down that's coming tonight and through the day tomorrow, we're going to see another warm up to start the weekend. So anything that does fall should fall as rain through the day on Friday, particularly for western portions of Labrador. But towards the north, though, this is where things get a little bit more sticky. We may see some freezing rain in the mix or some ice pellets for you into the afternoon and evening hours on Friday. Otherwise, temperatures right back up into the double digits again, 10 to 13 degrees across most of the island, except the northern peninsula. You'll stay in some of that cooler air, but lots of sunshine this story for your Friday. About 5 degrees for St. Anthony, same thing along the strait. And then temperatures in Labrador eventually will start to warm up as well. So between 7 and 9 degrees. May see a few flurries in the morning for central Labrador, but then other than that, that sun should come out through the day. Now, as we head into Friday evening and then Saturday, some of those showers will move a little bit further south. Another cold front will move through, but this one should stay as just rain into Saturday morning. And then really nothing happening across the island either. Even as we head into the afternoon, we may see a few showers work their way towards the west coast and northern peninsula, but overall those temperatures warming even more. So back up to between 14, 15, maybe even 16 degrees for your Saturday. And then again, the cool down happening for Lab West. So your temperatures will dip eventually, and you may even see a few flurries in the mix, but overall back up to the double digits again for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Cartwright along the strait between 11 and 12 degrees. Now taking a look at the long range forecast, it stays just like that. Pretty nice stretch of weather right through Monday, around 15 degrees with some cloudy periods. Overnight lows there have around 10 degrees for Monday, but they will dip as we head into Tuesday. That's when we're looking at another cool down happening. Central Newfoundland, you're looking at that similar warm up, clearing skies as we get through the afternoon on Monday. And then Western Newfoundland, a rainy Sunday at this point, but by Monday things should clear out. And again, between 12 to 14 degrees for the long range forecast. So not bad for the first week of November. That is well above where we should be sitting this time of year. Now for Eastern Labrador, things cool down as we get into Tuesday, like I said, so 8 degrees to start, but then you'll change over to the chance of flurries in the evening hours and then much cooler for Western Labrador, especially overnight on Monday as your temperatures dip down to about -3. Take a look at this beautiful shot. This is Adele waiting for the ferry on Fogo. A great shot there. Thank you so much. And if you have any weather photos that you would like to share with us, send them to my Facebook page, Twitter, or email them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
What a beautiful part of the province. Thank you so much for that, Adele. I can't get over that 5-day forecast for the east. I thought we were going to have to pay a price for all of the sunshine that we've been having lately, but it looks like we have another nice stretch.
Yeah, not yet, but like I said, come Tuesday, we'll see another dip in that jet stream, so the temperatures will go back down. I do see some snow in the forecast. Going to keep an eye on that one.
We'll enjoy it while it lasts.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good night.